So they are here now to answer your questions. We'll be moderating this panel discussion, so I want you to think about what questions you have for them. To get us kicked off, I have a couple questions to get it started, but please start to think about what do you want to learn from them. We don't have chairs and everything. It's only 10, 15 minutes, so that's why we're all going to stand. So my first question for you, and this is really important because obviously working with so many customers, I think it's a critical part of the transformation. What does it take to build strategists? What does it build, right? So there's a new generation. They're not just coaches anymore. It is strategists. It's kind of the conversation you've been having right now because it's that level of individuals that are going to be able to influence the change. If you can just all speak about what does good look like there and what does not great look like in terms of being a strategist. Who wants to take that on?
If I don't look at Sally, I won't have to go first, right? If I don't make eye contact, I don't have to go first. It's a really hard question, and it's been a challenge for us to move our coaching staff from that execute space into the strategy space. And I don't know that there's a magic bullet. And a lot of it is even having, and so much about what you talked about with having a plan to talk to those C-level executives. We don't give our coaching teams and our strategists opportunity to do that much. And so it's been a significant challenge for us to get them operating in the arena where they even feel confident they know the right decisions to make, but to be able to actually invite those leaders to participate in that has been a challenge for us. So I don't know that I have a good answer.
So for my team, and again, we were focused on being strategists. We were coaching at the same time, but strategy was our first priority. We remained relentlessly focused on the outcomes. We knew we needed at the start to change hearts and minds. That was the outcome that we were focused on. So our strategies were all focusing on how to change hearts and minds, and it meant that we had to pivot regularly. I mean, we had to really be open to challenging each other. I mean, I think that would be something that, one of the core elements of the recipe for success on that team that I built was trust and safety from the beginning. We had to be able to call each other out. We had to be able to say, strategically, I don't understand that, or strategically, I'm not sure that is going to get us the outcome. So you're starting to build a muscle that is constantly calling into question, what is strategy? What does strategy mean, right? Strategy ultimately is, where are you going to play? Who are you going to play for? What are you going to build in order to deliver on that? Those are the components of strategy. So you're coaching to business outcomes and performance. You're coaching in a way that says the strategy of this leader is like, how are my margins? Where are my competitors? What are my customers doing? We're not talking about coaching on how to build a backlog and move some stickies around, right? So you're getting them to really reprioritize the way in which they're thinking about what do our leaders who are responsible for running business portfolios, what strategies are they thinking about? And then ultimately, how do I, as an enablement team, a transformation leader, how do I start to build the muscle in my team so that we're helping leaders think about that? We're helping and speaking in a language that says, I'm going to help you get better margins or build better products.
That's good.
I think you have to be very aware of, when you're a business agility strategist, of who you're trying to influence. And it might be an unpleasant realization, but I think when you walk into most executive leadership's office, the first thing in their mind is, have you sat in my chair? If you haven't, why am I listening to you? You don't know what my world is like, right? So you have to be aware of who you're trying to influence in the organization. And sometimes you may be in sort of the functional hierarchy as a strategist below where the people that you most need to influence are, right? So now you have to assess, right? Because your criteria is, how will I be successful in pushing this forward? What tools do I have, or could I put in my toolbox to make that happen? You may have to either get somebody else in the organization who is their peer to talk to them. Sometimes you may have to bring in somebody from the outside, right, who has the resume that they can say, yes, I've sat in your chair, and have that conversation, at the very least to get the process started. But these, especially at the senior executive level, right, these are very proud people. They've had a lot of success in their career, right, and they're difficult to build a trusting relationship with.
All right, questions from the audience? Yes. Come on up if you don't mind. Or we actually, sorry, we've got a nice. There you go.
I love these.
And can you stand up and please start with your name, your company, and then go
Sure.
ahead and ask your question.
Hi, everybody. I'm Leslie Hill. I work in Lisa Popplewell's amazing organization as an enterprise transformation coach for American Express. My question is for you, Andrea. You mentioned that measurement is a role. And so how did you build that as a role, and what types of things did you measure in starting this journey?
I guess my first answer is I didn't really build any of these roles to start with in the beginning. There were jobs to get done. I knew that these were jobs to get done. So when I was shaping my team, I started by looking for people who had a broad base of capabilities that I could put into different scenarios. That was really important for me. I did not hire specialists. I hired generalists. So I started with this idea that we knew we needed to measure enterprise. We needed to speak to our group executive in a way that said we're making the organization better. So that's where we started. We started with a couple of really the transformation metrics around how are we doing at moving towards the elements that make up ultimate transformation. So these are the 7 pillars. How are we doing at moving from single focused annual funding that is locked and loaded once a year to more frequent funding release schedules. These were all aligned to the 7 pillars. How are we doing at creating stable cross-functional teams? It was difficult. I would actually say the approach that we took was we had to do a lot of convincing to even measure these things, because now you're starting to show your dirty laundry, right? It was really hard. And I would say we're not there. I don't think RBC has a good perspective on the progress they're making towards an enterprise business agility approach. Within the individual lines of business, it becomes far easier, right? Because now you've got an executive who's signed up for this through the pilots that we ran, and in the businesses that are transforming, they know that they need financial performance measures, and they know that there are a couple of core ways in which they work that they want to measure. So it's a conversation, really, when you're in the business, it's a conversation with that leader around what does good look like and how do we make that a metric now. So it's much easier when you're in the business. Enterprise, it's very hard, but the 7 pillars is where we started.
I just want to mention one thing in addition to that. The 7 pillars will really give you, here are the areas that you have to invest in, but ultimately what they want to know is, am I achieving flow, value, quality? So those 3 metrics are the non-negotiable that have resonated with people: flow, value, quality, plus happiness for my employees, and then everything else rolls up under there.
Morning, my name is Mehul. I'm with GF, the world's largest roofing manufacturer.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
My name is Mehul. I'm with GF, the world's largest roofing manufacturer. 2-part question. One, Lisa mentioned about alignment is the key, and Andrea backed it up by saying the getting alignment on the why is the key importance. So most situations, there's no disagreement or misalignment around the why. It often is about the what and the how. How did you approach that? And the second part of the question is around the readiness. So Rupert, you mentioned about the executive time availability. Sometimes it is not about the availability, but it's saying, I got this, I don't need help. How would you approach that?
Well, I think that's why, at least in my experience, I specifically asked for it, right? And in the conversation, they may say, well, why can't I delegate this? And so you get into creating the environment discussion, and they quickly realize that in their organization, they're the only person with the authority to actually make that sort of thing happen, right? They have budgets, they have people, they have all this sort of thing. And that's why you want to test it first, right? If that leader is not willing to invest some of their time to gain the benefit, then the benefit isn't large enough for them. You just move on. They're not ready.
I was just going to speak to our why and where we've really had to come together to get that alignment. If you even think, and many of you are American Express cardholders, there's a consumer base and there's a commercial base and there's partnerships and co-brands, and how many of you have a Delta card, right? And our whys would come from those varying representation of consumer and commercial, and they weren't having conversations, but they, however, required the same underlying talent in order to get value through the system. So in our case, often the why wasn't communicated across those organizational silos. And so we had to back up and start speaking in terms of why across those organizational boundaries, and then found out there were a lot of synergies with their value propositions, and they could come together again, delivering fewer capabilities, right? Less output, more value through the system to achieve the needs of varying customer personas.
One more question?
Hey, good morning. Rupert, you mentioned you tackle funding at the end, I think if I can remember correctly. And I don't know, Andrea or Lisa, when did you tackle funding and how?
And sorry, did you say when? When and how? So for us, lean portfolio management, that issue of prioritization, too much work, investments not being aligned to the highest value output or outcome, that was where we started. So we did have to start with portfolio and portfolio investment and funding right out of the gate, because we did not have enough time or resources or energy to deliver on what it was that we knew we needed to deliver on. So that was actually one of the ways in which we stepped into getting people aligned on wanting to change the way we work, was to put funding right at the forefront and say, all of you have portfolios that are 25, 30, 50% underfunded. What are you going to do about that? So funding was right at the forefront for us as a way to start the mechanisms around, great, how are we going to do more with less? Well, we need to reorganize our teams. We need to think better about leadership agility. We need to change the way we work. So for us, it was really a gateway. By focusing on funding and the fact that we just will never have enough money to do everything at once, it was the gateway to enable conversations around much more holistic system changes that needed to happen.
The reason I usually do it at the end is because the funding becomes an impediment, right? So it's a discovery, right? I usually think that executives are experiential learners, and so I want them to experience some pain first, right? So we'll get them started, we'll have priorities, and then they'll realize they're spending huge amounts of time and energy fighting over small project budgets instead of funding a value stream, right? But until they get a little bit of experience underneath their belt, they're not ready to take on that battle of changing the whole financial governance process. It's a big battle.
So we have one who did it up front and one who did it at the end, and then we're just doing it right in the middle. And I want to say we're in a process, and I don't think we've got it right. So we started in an environment where we were project-based funding. The business owned the money, and they would pay to actually have work done. We then made a decision at the beginning of 2019 that we were going to move the funding to our technology stacks and platforms, which now represents a whole nother problem that we haven't solved for, but our experiment is making that visible. So for example, we're not funding a portfolio. Let's say there are 4 different technologies required in that portfolio, and you've underfunded one of them by X millions of dollars. We can't get flow through the system. So we learned that the hard way this year, and I think we will continue to see our funding model evolve to that next step, which ultimately gets us to funding the value stream, but we're not there yet.
I'll be talking tomorrow morning, but I'll be talking tomorrow morning about a number of different topics, but part of that is looking at the key predictors of business agility from our research, and funding models is the #1 key predictor to successful transformation. We have time for one more question.
One more.
Anyone from this side? You've got a big arm, you can throw it all the way. No?
Nope. All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much.